Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast app or watching on YouTube, welcome to the Lion's Roar podcast, from the publishers of Lion's Roar magazine and Buddhadharma, the Practitioner's Guide. I'm Sandra Hannibone. If you enjoy this episode, subscribe so you don't miss future interviews. On May 19th, the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts celebrates the 80th birthday of one of its co-founders, Joseph Goldstein. As the Buddhadharma editorial team prepared a recent batch of content related to the concept of Buddhanature, editor Rod Meade Sperry reached out to Goldstein to hear how he, as a Theravada Buddhist monk who takes special care to inform his practice with wisdom from other traditions, has come to practice with and understand Buddhanature, a basic principle of Mahayana Buddhism. While you might expect this to be a heavy topic, Goldstein's approach is, as you'll hear, open-hearted, leaving plenty of room for laughter. This episode is sponsored by St. John's College in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Learn more about the St. John's Master of Arts in Eastern Classics at sjc.edu/lion.
Well, rather than my starting off by asking a bunch of questions, maybe I should start with the intriguing proposition that you just sort of put out there. You have some things to say. What would you say?
Okay, where to begin?
Wherever you'd like.
First, it's just kind of a foundational piece. Buddhanature is not a term that I've come across a lot in the early Buddhist teachings.
Sure.
That particular term seems to come about more in Mahayana and in Vajrayana.
Indeed.
And so the first thing, I guess, is just to maybe find a common definition of it that would make sense in terms of early Buddhism, since that term is not used that often, if at all.
Is the term something like nature of mind?
Even nature of mind, that's like a Dzogchen. Really a Dzogchen, maybe in Mahayana as well. Basically, in the Pali texts, it just talks about really the mind, the enlightened mind, free of defilements.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we could say, or for the purpose of the conversation, maybe just to frame it in terms of the enlightened mind would I think be a good cross tradition term.
That's great. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay.
I noticed in One Dharma that you have a list where you talk about some of the names for the ultimate freedom that Buddhanature represents. You listed the unconditioned, Dharmakaya, the unborn, pure heart, mind essence, nature of mind, ultimate bodhicitta, and nirvana. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and some of those, as I said, some of those terms are used more often in the later traditions. Some of the terms are used more often in the early tradition. I think a common representation in the later traditions is the understanding, and I've actually read this in I can't remember if it was in Buddhadharma or Snow Lion. It was a phrase that jumped out at me, and it reflected a lot of my thoughts about this. And the sentence was just something like, in this understanding, basically, we're already enlightened, and we simply have to realize it. So there was something like that.
Okay.
But a possible connotation of that. Okay, my mind is going in two different tracks here. One track, one connotation of it might imply that it's more accessible than it actually is.
Right, sure.
Oh yeah, the mind's already enlightened, and I just have to realize it, and the job's done.
Right.
And so when I read when I read about Buddhanature in that context, that raises some red flags for me.
Sure.
Because independent of whether we phrase it in terms of we're already enlightened and we just need to realize it, or we're not yet enlightened and we have to get there, in either case, the task is formidable. And in the language of Buddhanature, in my reading in different traditions, especially as interpreted by Western teachers, I don't think the Asian, Tibetan, and Mahayana teachers that I've studied with don't downplay the challenge of this. So that's one thing. There's something I want to read. I don't know whether you're familiar with the teachings of Chinul, Korean Zen master of 11th century.
I am not.
He's great.
Okay, spell that for me.
In terms of Chinul. And there's a collection of his teachings called Tracing Back the Radiance. And I think it was compiled and translated by Robert Buswell. I really love his way of framing it because he frames it in a way that encompasses both sides, the term he uses is sudden awakening, gradual cultivation. That's the frame. So I just want to read you this paragraph because it really summarizes everything I'm going to be trying to say.
Okay, please.
So, although we have awakened to original nature, beginningless habit energies are extremely difficult to remove suddenly. Hindrances are formidable, and habits are deeply ingrained. So how could you neglect gradual cultivation simply because of one moment of awakening? After awakening, you must be constantly on your guard. If deluded thoughts suddenly appear, do not follow after them. Then and only then will your practice reach completion.
That is very on point, isn't it?
Completely on point in my way of thinking. But there's a follow-up sentence that's really important.
I'm sorry, you said there's a follow-up sentence that's important?
Yeah, which is really important.
Okay.
I did pull it out. Well, I'll have to paraphrase the last part, which was really important. But okay, so the following sentence to that. So he's pointing out that one moment of awakening doesn't do the job.
Yes.
So that goes to the point of we just have to realize that we're enlightened.
Right.
And that's it. And Chinul is saying, no, we can have a moment of genuine awakening, and it's the beginning, not the end.
Right, indeed.
But he says, having had the moment of awakening, we then relate to the hindrances and the defilements in a different way. So he's acknowledging the power of the moment of awakening while still emphasizing the need for the ongoing cultivation of the practice. And I think this is the balance for me. Then talking about Buddhanature is really important.
Sure.
Because I see, especially in the West, many people may have had moments of genuine realization, where they really do touch into Buddhanature, and then perhaps assume, even if they realize they're not completely liberated, but it can become, at times it can become a rationale for not paying attention to the defilements that are still there.
In a bypassing sort of way.
Yeah, and this is why there are more than a few teachers who get into trouble.
Right.
Because they have had an actual realization. But then, oh, well, I've realized Buddhanature.
I'm done.
Okay, yeah. So this is the main theme of what I wanted to talk about. And I like Chenol because he acknowledges both sides, right? Yeah, that these moments of sudden awakening are possible, and yet habit energies are extremely difficult to remove suddenly. Hindrances are formidable, and habits are deeply ingrained.
That does all seem to be true.
Yes. So going back to the first question, and this was part of what I came to in One Dharma. I think all of these ways of talking about it, whether from the early Buddhist notion, that we're not enlightened, but we work towards it, or we're already enlightened and we have to realize it, to take both of those statements as skillful means rather than as statements of truth. And this is, so in One Dharma, when I was struggling with trying to reconcile the different views,
yes,
the thing that helped me the most, well, there was a phrase I used, metaphysics as skillful means.
Let's unpack that phrase.
Yeah, so I'll give you another example, but it ties into this in some way. In most Theravada traditions, early Buddhist traditions, Nibbana is said to transcend awareness, that awareness itself is a conditioned phenomenon. In many Mahayana and Tibetan traditions, there is an unconditioned awareness. And this is, I think the Thai tradition also leans in that direction. So this was the big dilemma for me, because, okay, is the final goal transcend awareness, or is it an unconditioned awareness? So these are two very different metaphysical views. And great enlightened masters in each of the traditions, speaking from their experience, were offering these two alternatives. And it drove me crazy. But here, poor Joseph, trying to decide on his life work,
yeah,
and where it's going. Is it going left? Is it going right? And so I was on a Dzogchen retreat actually 2 months when this was tormenting me. So it was like a koan, that. And finally, I realized that I was asking the wrong question. It wasn't a question of who was right. And then I saw metaphysics as skillful means is that each of those positions, not to see them as statements of truth, but as a skillful means for not clinging. Because in my understanding and practice in many traditions, to me, that is the essence of the free mind, the mind that's not clinging to anything.
Can I ask, maybe you don't recall, maybe I'm prying, but what was the moment on this Dzogchen retreat where this started to coalesce in your mind as a resolution for this problem?
Yeah, I don't remember the particular moment, but it was when I came up with that understanding that all teachings should be considered skillful means and not metaphysical truths.
Yes.
That's what unlocked the whole thing. Because if they're seen as metaphysical truths and there are opposing views, one is right and one is wrong.
That's right. That's right.
If they're seen as skillful means for not clinging, it doesn't matter if they're different views. The test is, does it result in no clinging or not?
Indeed. Indeed.
And in fact, then it's very possible to have different methods, different methodology, even different metaphysics, but still serving the same purpose of freeing the mind from any grasping. And so that became the bottom line for me in trying to reconcile the different traditions. And so in this particular case, it's the same thing. Whether we see Buddhanature, whether we're already enlightened and we just don't know it, or
That's
we're
right.
not yet enlightened and we'll get there someday, rather than positioning one against the other, just see, okay, how do they serve? So I want to read you something else, which
Thank you. Please.
combines. I did a little homework here. Do you know the book Mount Analog?
What is it?
Mount Analog.
I have heard of Mount Analog. I have not read it.
Okay, so it's by René Domal, and he uses the climbing of a mountain as the metaphor for spiritual realization.
Okay.
And it was very popular back in the 60s and 70s.
Sure.
It was good then. I'm presuming would hold up.
Okay, so what you're going to read is from that book?
From that book. And again, it's just a few sentences.
Okay.
But it's another take on what I've been saying.
Great.
Keep your eye fixed on the way to the top. But don't forget to look right in front of you. The last step depends on the first. Don't think you've arrived just because you see the summit. Watch your footing. Be sure of the next step. But don't let that distract you from the highest goal. The first step depends on the last. So that's just another way of saying they're both, it's not either or, they're both part of the whole picture.
What you're saying about being open to many possibilities, all being valuable
Yes.
at the same time. I mean, that's really the most Buddhist view I can imagine having, really.
Yes. Not only different views being valuable, the different views are in a way necessary for each other, because each one is a corrective to the potential pitfalls of the other.
That's right.
And so people, I'm already enlightened, it's all done. Watch the step right in front of you because you're going to trip over a rock.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you're so concerned with not tripping over the rock, and you lose sight of where you're going, the vision of the top, and even a glimpse of it, that's what motivates you to keep going forward. So that's where the last step depends on the first, but the first step depends on the last. So this is my shtick. This is the point.
This is the
me.
point.
St. John's College in Santa Fe, New Mexico is for undergraduate and graduate students who seek a lifelong commitment to thoughtful, collaborative inquiry into fundamental human questions. Graduate students pursuing the Master of Arts in Eastern Classics examine the core literary, philosophical, and theological works of India, China, and Japan. In small discussion-based classes, students delve into the richness of Asian traditions and study one of two languages, Classical Chinese or Sanskrit. The 3-semester Eastern Classics program offers the flexibility of both online and on-campus options. Learn more about the St. John's Master of Arts in Eastern Classics at sjc.edu/campus. buddhist.edu/lion.
Boy, am I speaking to the right person or what? But I should ask you some more things.
Well, I don't know if you want a few more.
If you don't mind sharing them, you'll only make me smarter.
Okay. So, two other things, and then
Please.
Are you familiar with Stephen Mitchell's work?
Yes, somewhat.
So one of the things he did, he wrote a small book of his own poetry called Parables and Portraits. And one of them is called The Myth of Sisyphus.
Okay.
Yeah, and he just describes in his poem, Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill.
Yeah.
He talks about how Sisyphus is in love with the rock. He goes on in that vein, but then he says he doesn't realize that at any moment he is permitted to step aside, let the rock hurtle to the bottom and go home. That's his take on the myth of Sisyphus.
Okay.
Okay. So now there's the myth of Icarus.
Right.
You know that?
Too close to the sun.
Right. So I think those two Greek myths symbolize just what I've been talking about, and how each can be the corrective for the other.
Right.
Because Sisyphus, in love with his rock, we can be so enmeshed in our suffering that we're just entangled, and we lose sight of the top of the mountain. And on the other hand, we can get a glimpse of the top. We can be flying high, the high view of already enlightened, but not having done all the necessary work, even if the glimpse is genuine. So then we're like Icarus flying high, close to the sun, and we come crashing down.
Right.
And unfortunately, well, I've just seen people get trapped in both of those ways. People so enmeshed. And there's one example in my own practice. I saw how these two work. So on one retreat with Sayadaw U Pandita, was classic. He's a classic Theravada, hardcore.
Yeah.
So I've practiced a lot with him. And in that style of Vipassana, there's quite a bit of emphasis, whether spoken or not, about the progress of insight and the different stages of insight. And so it can become very goal-oriented. So that's
sure.
That's kind of built into that metaphysics.
Okay.
And so that has to be negotiated. We have to learn how to practice with that rigor, but without getting caught by that. Right? So for me, and in a way, I knew too much theoretically. So I knew all about these stages and all of that. And so I found myself with an unhealthy striving, right? Okay. When I was doing intensive practice. But I had also done some Dzogchen practice by then. And so even on an U Pandita retreat, when I was working in that very rigorous way, but I saw myself caught. It's like Sisyphus in love with the rock.
Right.
I just, in a particular moment, I was just doing some walking meditation and saw myself the striving mode. And I just said to myself, already aware, which is more like the Dzogchen flavor, right? There's nothing to do, already aware. And it was amazing how just that phrase completely balanced everything else. Because then I was able to continue in Vipassana mode, but with the relaxation of non-striving.
I see. Sure.
So this is another example of, it's not one is right and one is wrong. That each has its own value, and each is, in a way, helps to address, the potential problems of each.
Would you go so far as to say that the antidote for each is only the other?
No.
Okay.
No, I think that.
So if you were trapped, if you were stuck in a line of thought, and the other wasn't a way out, what would be another way to see it through?
I'll give you another. No, I think there are many ways, and the teachings are filled with antidotes to various problems.
Sure, of course.
These have been well documented over a few thousand years.
Yes.
But I'll just give you an example from a recent retreat.
Oh, please, yeah.
So you know Bhikkhu Anelio?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So he lives just down at the study center, just down the street from mine.
Right.
And we're good friends. And we were doing a self-retreat, myself at my house, he down in his kuti down at the study center at the same time. And we were both sitting for a few months. And so one afternoon, I'm doing my practice, but I was just frittering away some time. I didn't know what I was doing, just wasting time. And then I had the thought, I'll bet Anelio's not wasting time because he's so disciplined.
Sure.
And it's really hardcore. And so then I began to get down on myself. It wasn't traumatic, but it definitely affected my mood. Why aren't I working harder, and self-judgment and all that. But then very quickly, quite quickly, this comes from all the years of practice, I saw that whole pattern was simply the manifestation of, in Pali, the word is mana, which is usually translated as conceit. And it's conceit in that sense is simply the sense of I am, yes, particularly with regard to comparing mind. I'm better than, I'm worse than, I'm equal to. But the essence is the I am.
Got it.
But in this case, it was just mana. I was comparing myself to Anelio, and I was feeling bad about myself. But as soon as I recognized the defilement for what it was, I just, in a moment, that's just mana, and seeing the mana itself as impersonal and non-self.
Right.
So even though it's about I am, that habit pattern is itself selfless, like everything else. And so for me, then the antidote was not going to something like already aware. It was going from the content of the thought process to recognizing the defilement which was creating it. And as soon as I saw, that's just mana, the whole thing disappeared.
That's beautiful.
So this is just another example. There are many antidotes.
Yes.
And one of the virtues of long, practice over many, many years is that we each have a toolbox. I have a million antidotes for different things that just came out of my own practice.
Oh, that's
and some are more Dzogchen oriented, some are more, Theravada oriented. Yeah, so I think there are many.
That's great.
But in the general frame that we've been talking about, the two I mentioned is, I think that's a helpful way of understanding how each approach can help free us from the danger of the other.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Let me think here about what I want to ask. I mean, essentially, you've answered without me asking any questions, pretty much every question I had.
I've been thinking about this subject for a while because I always get, it's a trigger point for me. It's like a red flag goes up when I read a biased view one way or another. you know, I just feel no sense. To me, something feels off here.
Yes.
And I felt this way for a long time. So
Yeah, well, I mean that's borne out in your work and in your writing. I mean, you really seem to be always investigating, trying to find the same common ground
yeah,
that we're looking
yeah,
for as well.
because there is only one Dharma. we may not see the unity of it at all the time,
Yeah,
but it's not like there are two Dharmas out there.
that's right. That's right. Besides the ways that are implied in what what you've said here today, is there any sense of how you've come to how your understanding of the nature of mind has it changed or evolved since you first were a monk, and now you've experienced so many? I wonder if you could characterize how your understanding has evolved since you've been working with so many different teachers out in different
Right.
traditions and so on.
So first, just to clarify something, my monkhood was very brief. I did not spend a lot of time.
Understood.
I did one of these 6-week ordinations.
Right.
So I don't consider that I was really a monk.
Okay, fair enough.
My practice was as a lay person.
Sure.
It's evolved a lot. I mean, it's hard even to, well, one obvious way. I mean, I started. Okay, this is going back into early history. So just at the end of my Peace Corps days, so I was young, and I had just gotten into the Buddhist teachings, not done much intensive practice. And I was in a situation, and I think I mentioned this in One Dharma actually, just at the end of my Peace Corps stay in Thailand, somebody was reading from a Tibetan text, and it was a powerful text. It was a poor translation of a powerful text.
Okay.
And I know that you were familiar with the old Evans Wentz books.
Yeah.
Okay, so it turns out he wasn't a very accurate translator. However, that book at that time was called the Tibetan Book of the Great Liberation. Right. And the actual text, and I've since seen the more accurate ones, very powerful. It's a direct pointing to the nature of the mind from the Tibetan perspective. So I was listening, and for some reason, my mind, a friend was reading it to me. So I was just listening. My mind got very, very concentrated, and something really powerful happened. A real opening to, you could say, emptiness or selfless nature of everything, or zero, It felt like it opened to that kind of ultimate reality. But this was before I had really done any intensive practice. So it was very discombobulating. It was like suddenly I was turned inside out.
Sure.
Without a particular framework to hold it. So I left the Peace Corps, then I came back to the States, but I was transformed in a fundamental way. And I realized I had to go back and find a teacher. So I went back and traveled around India. And what was so interesting is, after meeting different teachers, I ended up in Bulgaria with Munindraji, my first teacher, who was teaching Burmese Vipassana. And my feeling at that time was that practice was the perfect expression of what I experienced through listening to a Tibetan text.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I think that was the seeds in me of One Dharma.
Wow, all the way back then.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, but I wasn't even thinking in those terms. I was
Of
young.
course.
I was 20, 23 years old. I didn't know anything, but had this powerful experience.
And you really had a sense of it that you were reconciling things that might otherwise be considered as opposites.
Well, I wasn't even thinking in reconcile. I was in this place of needing to find a practice that could somehow relate to this experience I had just had.
Sure.
And I felt that Vipassana was exactly what I was looking for. So I felt completely at home. Okay, so fast forward, 20 years.
Yeah.
That when I had really devoted, to that practice. But then in coming back to the West, a lot of my friends had studied with great Tibetan lamas. And so I got introduced to other Tibetan teachings and to Dzogchen teachings more formally, and their practices. And so it was really through that. And first, again, trying to reconcile the metaphysics of the two, because in those early years, I wasn't even aware that they had different metaphysical underpinnings.
Right.
I was just young and trying to sort everything out.
Sure.
Later on, as I had done more practice and study, I saw, they're saying different things here. So it was much later that I began to explore everything I talked about in One Dharma, metaphysics as skillful means. And so it really did change over many years. And then I did a little Zen practice, so, wove some of that in. So one other major change, which I think happens, at least with some people as they age.
Sure.
I'm a lot less certain about things now than I was 20 years ago.
That sounds great to me.
I remember getting into these intense Dharma debates, totally convinced that I was right and my view was the right view, and passionately, arguing it and believing it. And now, so again, this was in One Dharma. One of the other things that came out of that struggle to put it all together. One of my favorite mantras these days is, who knows? Who knows?
That's good.
When I'm fully enlightened, maybe then I can say I know. But until then, it seems best to keep an open mind.
I like that. I recalls Sokne Rinpoche, one of his favorite mantras is, who cares, so what?
Yeah. Yeah. So because it really talks about that's really addressing attachment to view.
That's right. And you've really come to the point where you're seeking out alternate views, because that that the alternate views are
another skillful means.
And there'll be a remedy for something in your mind. Right. Yeah. Beautiful.
And for me, the who knows it's not the who knows of confusion. It's the who knows of openness.
Right. Which is liberating.
Yeah, completely. I feel so much. Okay, so this is my definition of enlightenment.
Go.
Lightening up.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think it's just the process of lightening up.
Yeah.
From the more superficial levels to the most profound levels.
Good.
Because basically lightening up means letting go of all self-reference.
Yeah.
Which is no easy task. And it's a process.
Right. But it's worth it.
clearly. I mean, I'm much happier now than I was then.
Oh, that's great to be put down the having to know everything. It's true.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
True.
And believing that you do.
Boy, this has been
Yeah.
fantastic.
Uh-huh.
Is there anything else that you would like to say?
I'll leave you with one last of the things. I did make a few notes here. Okay, so I think this in a way sums up everything we've been talking about. In some way, from a Zen perspective.
Okay.
You know Sung San Sansanin?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So one of his phrases, which I quote a lot, I really love, he said, "There's no right and no wrong, but right is right and wrong is wrong."
Yeah, that's good.
And it's the same thing, you know, on one level, everything is already empty. So on that level, one could say, you know, we're already enlightened because self is an illusion in the first place. It's not really there. There's no right and no wrong. It's all just empty phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
And right is right and wrong is wrong.
That's right.
And you need both.
You do. You need both.
And that's the same point as in Mount Analog.
Yeah.
And with the whole discussion, we need both to really have a balanced move forward.
Joseph, really, what a delight and an honor to talk to you. I'm just so pleased. Thank you so much for making the time. You're
well, I'm
great.
glad you reached out.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Okay, have a wonderful night and be well.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Mission-driven, nonprofit, and community-supported, Lion's Roar offers Buddhist teachings, news, and perspectives so that the understanding and practice of Buddhism flourish in today's world, and its timeless wisdom is accessible. Go to lionsroar.com to subscribe and get unlimited access to online articles, new magazine issues, and several collections, plus perks and exclusives from Lions Roar magazine and Buddhadharma, the Practitioner's Guide.